Hello YouTube. Tamriel is full of interesting factions, races and tribes, and today I want to take a look at a group of Redguards that hold a very interesting place in Tamrielic history and Redguard culture as a whole. As this particular group of Redguards worships a completely different deity compared to their brethren in Hammerfell, worshipping a strange horse god. And their story as a people even has a completely different beginning, as they did not arrive together with the Redguards of the warrior waves or the Ragada when their ancient homeland of Yakuda sank into the sea. Rather, they arrived several centuries earlier for completely different reasons. Now, we'll explore all of that and more after the intro, when we'll talk about the story of the Silverhoof horse tribe. So, the Silverhoof Horsemen, or Silverhoof Horse Tribe. Like I said in the intro, they are a completely different group of Redguards with a completely different origin and belief system compared to their brethren in Hammerfell. You see, while the Redguards of Hammerfell have quite a sophisticated society with massive cities like Sentinel, Highgate and Taneth, with a long and storied history, the Silverhoof Horsemen have stayed strictly nomadic since their arrival on Tamriel from their ancestral homeland of Yakuda, about 200 years before the arrival of the Ragada, or the warrior waves that conquered Hammerfell and would found Redguard society on Tamriel. And instead of settling in Hammerfell, the Silverhoof Horsemen settled in northern Hyrox mountainous valleys instead, where they established their own nomadic society. In fact, the Silverhoof Horsemen built no real permanent settlements at all during their existence. They are, for all terms and purposes, a nomadic society, primarily seeking shelter in the caves of northern Hyrox close to the fields where they let their horses graze and build their horse pens. Their tribe is led by a group of elders who determine the course of the tribe and their head horse breeder, the herd master. They also seem to have some important role in their society, but we don't exactly know how. In fact, their entire society essentially revolves around horses, as their daily life, mythology, their culture and likely also their bards' music is heavily influenced by their horse-centric traditions. For example, they seem to compare the children to horsefoal, and their primary and seemingly only deity in their religion is called the Herd Mother, an obscure and mysterious horse god who apparently appears in the shape of a horse and guides their people, seemingly speaking to them through the wind somehow. The Herd Mother is said to both guide and protect the tribe, and in order to gain proper adulthood, each member of the tribe has to partake in a ritual where the young Redguard attempts to commune with the Herd Mother in what they call a vision journey, where they are seemingly shown visions of some sort. Now, we actually know quite little of this horse god. All we really know is that the Herd Mother is apparently only worshipped by this specific tribe of Redguards, and scholarly Redguards from Hammerfell who have visited their tribe centuries after their own landing on Hammerfell, they observed that in their own records of Yakuda they found no evidence of the Herd Mother having been a prominent Yakudan deity. However, in that same source, the Redguard scholar admits that a lot of the ancient Yakudan traditions and obscure religions were lost when the continent sank into the sea, and it used to be quite a big place, so an obscure cult of an obscure god is possible to have existed there. So it's possible that the Herd Mother had some sort of bigger cult on Yakuda, but that knowledge simply became lost. Although it's likely that the Herd Mother had at least some form of cult on Yakuda before the Silverhoof Horsemen left Yakuda for Tamriel, as according to the tribe's own oral histories, they actually left the continent because their own way of life and their way of worship of the Herd Mother was in danger. You see, back in the early First Era, the continent of Yakuda was in a bit of a chaotic period, because the Yakudan emperors that had reigned over the continent for ages, they were overthrown. At least they were made powerless and rendered into more of a ceremonial role, while the Yakudan nobility took more power. This happened just before the year 400 of the First Era and caused for a period of almost 300 years of civil strife between nobility and local rulers, which threw Yakuda completely into chaos. It's during this period of civil strife that the ancestors of the Silverhoof Horsemen left their ancient homeland of Yakuda, around the year 500 of the First Era, likely fleeing the civil strife, and perhaps, like their own oral histories corroborate, religious persecution as well, as it's possible that the nobility of northern Yakuda in the region of Akos-Kazas, where they and many other horse-herding tribes used to live according to the surviving records, that the nobility ruling over these lands tried to become more religiously strict and tried to outlaw heretical deities. but that's honestly just speculation, as we know very little of Yakudan society to begin with, and even less about the specific policy of local rulers. It's just a possibility considering the period of chaos and civil strife. But what we do know is that this specific period was very chaotic, and that the Silverhoof Horsemen left specifically during this period. Now, according to their own oral histories, the Herd Mother guided them to northern Tamriel to preserve her worship, and that they left Yakuda with their horses on a flotilla of swimming horse ships, which the Herd Mother gifted to them. They then used these swimming horse ships to cross 17 different seas before landing on Tamriel and settling in the northern valleys of High Rock, where they were quickly able to establish themselves as a people, as the people of Northern High Rock were in a period of civil strife of their own, with the ending years of the hegemony of the Dareni elves and the rise of Breton kingdoms. This chaos then allowed them to claim some mountainous valleys for themselves and establish themselves as their own separate Redguard culture on Tamriel. Now, interestingly enough, while the story of the swimming warships is likely not true, with centuries of oral history obscuring the actual truth probably, we do know from visiting Redguard scholars from Hammerfell that the horses that the Silverhoof tribe breed are actually remarkably similar in species to some of their own horse species, which are said to trace their lineage back to old Yakuda, so there likely has to be at least some truth to the whole story. Now, that having been said, while they arrived 200 years before the Yakudan warrior waves and the fall of the continent of Yakuda, they never truly became a big or dominant culture. Instead, they were content living in their mountainous valleys, living in the caves close to their horses, where they sheltered from the local monsters like harpies. Here they stayed relatively primitive, breeding their horses and making basic products, often with horse decorations like blankets, and trading some of their bred horses with the local Bretons, who are happy to trade materials and other valuables with them in exchange for their excellent horses. Redguard scholars who observed them have even noted that it's likely that it is from this trade and their interaction with the Bretons that has made their culture even further removed from traditional Redguard culture, as they even lost more of the Yakudan language for a more Breton dialect, which does still feature some Yakudan words, but is seemingly closer to the Breton language than the Yakudan language, making them truly a separate culture. And they're different from most Redguards in another way, as they are for all terms and purposes a very peaceful tribe with no real martial tradition. While they probably have some mastery of mounted combat, they do not have any big martial traditions of their own and even have to hire outside help to get rid of monsters close to their cave villages. They mostly just care about peace, keeping to themselves, but they do boast a unique culture not seen anywhere else on Tamriel. And they have a distinctly separate history from the Redguards of Hammerfell, which is what makes them so endlessly fascinating. Now, we don't exactly know what happened to them in the years after the Second Era, because we know that they were still around during the Second Era. We have simply no records of the Silverhoof Horsemen existing anywhere else. However, we do know that High Rock had several nomadic tribes, even in the Third Era, as there were so-called river tribes and horse tribes. It's possible that later Imperial observers just grouped the Silverhoof Horsemen together with these horse tribes, or perhaps these horse tribes are the Silverhoof Horsemen, but as far as we know those horse tribes were Breton, so we don't exactly know. Although, again, around the Second Era their culture had already been mostly Breton compared to Redguard, so maybe that's where the confusion comes from. We don't really know. Do let me know what you think though. Do you think they're still around or not? Let me know. Anyway, that's about all I can say about the Silverhoof horse tribes, and I am really happy that you watched this video, and I hope that you learned something new about the Elder Scrolls lore. And if you did, why not give the video a like or one of those hype boost things, would really help me out. By the way, if you need a new notebook for, lore notes or study notes, I happen to sell Imperial knowledge lore notebooks. Look, I'm doing things like this with it, but you can use it for normal notes or something else. Okay, mandatory March plug over. Look in the description or in the top comment for a link to the store. And now all that's left for me to be done is to thank my top Patreon supporters: Goblark, Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Volker of Argonia, RB Dash, Lexicon, Polycom, Sir Otter, Sword of Bushido, Rakai, Mike Willis, Dodo Komodo, James Lynch, Barademas, and Kalakranz. These people, along with all the amazing people on screen, are my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members, and they keep this channel alive. And for that, I am very grateful. Alright, see you in the next lore video. Bye bye.